Bye, Dad. Don't wait up.
Whoa. Wait a minute, Lisa. Come back here. You're not going out with all that makeup on.
McDonald's is huge in a lot of places, and unfortunately, being that large means that more times than not, stories get out into the public. Sometimes these stories are good, sometimes they're bad, and sometimes they're downright ridiculous. There are so many to choose from, told by customers, ex-employees, and the mainstream media. It's hard to even know where to start when it comes to good McDonald's stories. So why not begin right here with this list of top 10 McDonald's stories. Knockout at McDonald's.
I'm the manager here. There's no problem. No problem at all.
You gonna give me a problem?
Sometimes in a fast food environment, it's really hard to keep your cool. You're working on your feet all day, and sometimes the kitchen area can feel like the hottest place on earth. On top of that, you also tend to deal with hungry people who are in a rush, and a lot of them can be pretty rude. For the most part, keeping your cool involves ignoring the impatient tone in the customer's voice as you wait for the fries to cook or you pour their coffee. But sometimes it's not as easy as it sounds. One employee at a McDonald's showed just what you shouldn't do when a customer is being rude.
I think you got a hero here, honey bunny!
Well, just execute him!
A video of the employee went viral, showing the McDonald's employee knocking the unruly customer out with one impressive punch. At the time, he probably thought he was doing the right thing, but he more than likely had a few regrets once he had to deal with the consequences of his actions. There is a bit of backstory. Apparently, the customer was fairly intoxicated and had been doing some very disrespectful and downright disgusting things, such as spitting on the counter. There was probably more to it than just the employee having to deal with this one drunken idiot, but regardless, it made for quite the interesting story.
How we doing, baby?
I gotta go pee.
McD's marketing plan gone wrong.
That review went viral.
What does that mean?
At one point, the marketing team over at McDonald's thought it was a great idea to get people to tell their favorite McDonald's stories on Twitter and use the hashtag McDStories. For some reason, they didn't seem to see the major flaw in that idea, the flaw being the fact that people weren't going to use the hashtag solely for heartwarming stories about how great their local McDonald's was. It seems like quite a big oversight on their end to not realize that a social media marketing scheme such as this had a huge potential to go all wrong. It's the sort of thing that you would assume marketing experts would think about. The idea backfired on them horribly when the hashtag went wild, leaving them with very few good stories.
You know about Twitter?
Yeah, I have an account.
Yeah? How's it work?
Instead, it was used to showcase such gems as a video of a live mouse that was in a sealed bag of McDonald's buns, and every insult people could think of to throw at McDonald's. Hopefully, the fast food company learned its lesson and doesn't plan on attempting to use that sort of social media marketing again in the future.
Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur of soap.
Ahead for business at McDonald's.
Check your food before you take a bite.
McDonald's came out pretty lucky when a Virginia mother had taken her kids for an innocent meal at her local McDonald's and found a fried chicken head in with her chicken wings. When she discovered it, she brought the situation immediately to a McDonald's employee. She was offered either a refund on her meal or a new box of chicken. She opted for the refund and decided to go home and cook for her kids instead, which seems like she made a very good choice. The odds of finding the same or even another disgusting thing in your chicken wings twice in a row are pretty slim, but after finding that particular sort of surprise in her food, she probably didn't have much of an appetite, especially for more chicken wings. Finding the deep-fried head of a chicken in your meal isn't a great experience, but McDonald's got off relatively easy in this situation. Most other people would have taken them to the bank with a lawsuit, and with good reason.
Jimmy McGill, a lawyer you can trust.
Finding a chicken head, or really any whole body part of any animal in your food when it's not supposed to be there, is a horrifying situation, hopefully one that most people will never have to deal with. Lucky for the fast food giant, this particular woman decided that she would be content with just a refund and a home-cooked meal.
Oh, baby, too!
One of the Good McStories.
Tear down this wall. Tear it down.
Not all McDonald's stories are bad or disgusting. Sometimes a McDonald's employee truly goes above and beyond what is expected of them at the job. One such incident happened at a McDonald's location in Chicago. It was during a pretty busy time when a man in a wheelchair approached the register. Not only did the employee take the time to patiently figure out what the man was asking for, even though he was having a hard time understanding him, but he also did something very unexpected when he did figure out what it was the man needed.
Reagan smash. Reagan smash.
The customer was handicapped and wasn't able to eat his meal unassisted, and so he was asking the McDonald's cashier for help with his food. Now, most people would probably just dismiss the man, ignore him in favor of helping the lineup instead, assuming that their supervisor wouldn't be too happy if they just left their till in the middle of rush hour. This particular employee shut down his till and disappeared, and much to the surprise of another customer who had been watching the whole thing unfold, he had gone to the back to wash his hands and put on gloves. The caring employee then proceeded to go with the man to his table and assist him with cutting up his food and helping him eat it. Only someone who truly cared about their fellow man would go so out of their way for someone, and it's very heartwarming to hear that people like him do exist out there.
Everybody clap your hands.
McDonald's coffee is a little too hot.
This is, excuse me, a damn fine cup of coffee.
Now, most people have probably already heard the story of the infamous hot coffee that ran rampant throughout media outlets when it first happened in the 90s. Sorry to say, most of the reporting on the incident was outright false. The unfortunate elderly woman simply planned on grabbing a coffee at McDonald's and continuing on with her day. But what she didn't expect was to end her day with severe third-degree burns that put her in shock and almost took her life. McDonald's ended up paying out $640,000, a good deal of which went straight towards the woman's medical bills, as skin grafts are an expensive medical procedure and her case was so extreme. Since this happened in the United States, she would have had to pay for most of her medical treatment out of pocket. This story was a huge one, and it was talked about for quite some time after it happened. It led to a false narrative that the woman had been driving with the cup between her legs, not true, and that this was all her own fault, also not true. McDonald's coffee had burned hundreds of people up until that point, since they were serving it at near boiling temperatures.
Hot coffee! You idiot! You gonna spill hot coffee all over me, huh?
Thanks to this brave woman whose name was dragged through the mud, McDonald's finally lowered their coffee temperatures and added a label to the coffee cups.
This is horrible. It tastes like cat litter.
I think it tastes delicious.
That time, McDonald's got hacked.
Well then, it's hacking time.
Some may think that McDonald's getting hacked wouldn't be a big deal, but it sort of was, and it didn't even affect the business itself that much, other than giving them a pretty negative reputation for it. This isn't the only time that McDonald's has been hacked. Even their Twitter account has been hacked more than once, so it's probably not the best idea to entrust them with any of your personal information.
The fiery buffalo chicken wrap?
Yeah.
It did affect the customers and website users through providing the hackers with all sorts of personal information from various McDonald's websites, which included their ever-popular Monopoly websites. After the incident, the company warned its customers not to trust any phone calls or emails they received from the company, as they would most likely be the hackers attempting to scam them. Along with email addresses and phone numbers, the hackers also had access to customers' full names, physical addresses, and even information that had been gathered by McDonald's about their promotional and advertising preferences. That's a lot of personal information to trust McDonald's with, let alone some hacker who is determined to scam you out of any and all money they can get.
Who am I speaking to? Can I get your name and number?
The customer isn't always right at McD's.
This woman was careless and rude and hurt my son.
No, wait a minute.
A story told by one former McDonald's employee tells the tale of one particularly irate woman who thought she was in the right and there was no possible way she could be wrong, until it was proven that she was in fact wrong. As the story goes, a woman sent her young child into the restaurant by himself with the money to buy food for the two of them. As usual, the cashier helped the young boy and handed him his change, and the boy went on his merry way back out to his mother with the food he had ordered. A few short minutes later, and the boy's mother stormed into the restaurant, yelling about how her child had not given her the correct change. She insisted that the cashier must have shortchanged the boy because he was young and they figured they could get away with it. A manager was brought in to deal with the situation, and all of the tills were counted to show that they had the correct amount, so there's no way that he could have been shortchanged. Despite this fact, and that the McDonald's uniforms at that location had no pockets, she kept angrily yelling about how the cashier must have taken the money as there was no other possible explanation.
Stand down, creature.
That is, until the former employee who told the story went to change the garbage out in the customer area. Lo and behold, a receipt was found on top of the garbage in the bag, and it was folded neatly with the missing $10 bill in it. It was brought over to the lady, who promptly realized that she was wrong and had been throwing a fit for no reason. Needless to say, she was embarrassed and left in a pretty big hurry.
I'm sorry, you're too stupid to understand basic human decency.
Theft at McDonald's.
My sandwich! My sandwich!
It's no surprise to most that theft occurs, probably at every McDonald's location around the world. Most people wouldn't think of most of the theft as actually stealing anything, but it happens quite often in the form of taking unauthorized drinks or food for free. It may seem nominal, but if employees are doing it quite often and over a period of time, it can really add up for a company. Worse though than taking a Big Mac or some large fries every shift you work is outright stealing entire cases of food or toys. There are many stories out there of instances where employees were caught taking things that they definitely shouldn't be taking.
I'm not a thief, right? Then what about that, Jeff?
But one of the most ridiculous ones is simply a case of no common sense. A former McDonald's employee tells of a coworker who had been stealing entire boxes of frozen hamburger patties and other food supplies when he took the garbage out.
Garbage day!
This apparently continued on for quite some time until he was finally caught by the store manager with a box of frozen hamburgers in the trunk of his car. It's a wonder he got away with it for as long as he did, and who knows how much food he had actually taken over the months before he was caught red-handed. But management knew something was wrong, as there was always a shortage when they would do inventory. He was immediately fired, and the case of the food inventory shortages was solved.
All I want to know is who's coming with me.
Sometimes it pays to be nice at Mickey D's.
How'd you like a brand new car?
One example of some truly good customers comes from a McDonald's location in Kansas, where one very lucky McDonald's employee received a pretty huge surprise. A regular customer that came by quite often stopped in for a different reason one day during a specific McDonald's employee's shift. To everyone's surprise, the customer stopped in to give one of their favorite employees a present, a car. They had heard that the employee's current car had broken down, and they had been relying on getting rides from friends, family, and coworkers in order to get to and from their shifts at McDonald's. Now, we all know that working at McDonald's doesn't pay the best, so the employee was trying to find themselves a cheaper car that they could afford, since they knew that they couldn't rely on other people for rides forever. Lucky for them, they had made quite the good impression on this particular regular customer.
This is like the Price is Right or something, right?
Because when he himself had some good luck and received a brand new truck, he decided that rather than sell his old vehicle, he would spread a little bit of that good karma and give it to the out-of-luck McDonald's employee. Now that must have been some great customer service from that employee for a regular customer to be willing to gift her a car.
For real?
It's all yours. For real. It is yours.
McDonald's employee loyalty.
Everything I learned at McDonald's, I kept throughout my life and in my career.
For most people, your first job at McDonald's tends to be a short-lived job. Maybe something just for the summer while school is out, or a job you keep for a year or two to save up for that special something. But for one employee in particular, it was a lifelong career. A McDonald's restaurant in Australia back in the 1980s implemented a program where they hired people with moderate disabilities. And one such employee was a young man with Down syndrome who was only 18 at the time. He became something of a local celebrity, a few people only going into the McDonald's location to see him. He was sort of the local face of the restaurant, and people loved how he was just a little bit cheeky at times.
I'll be right back.
He worked there for an impressive 32 years in various roles before he finally retired at the age of 50. Co-workers were sad to see him go. Many of them recalling some great stories of working with him and saying that he always made them smile. He was much loved by his co-workers and customers alike, and he loved his job more than most things. 32 years working at the same job? Now that's loyalty.
32 and you're flipping burgers?
Order up more by staying right here and help yourself to seconds by clicking on our next great video. And find out how to become an official Babble Topper by clicking on the join link in the description below.